And what
Okay,
I've
well,
experienced,
listen, we gonna agree to disagree.
just that,
I have
or
another
you
question for you.
just say you said something
We're gonna
imprecisely on
agree to
something
disagree
else.
because you've already said that you wasn't wrong, right? I don't think
Yeah,
that you were wrong in the entire conversation because there were parts of the conversation that I actually agreed with you. But to use somebody personally as the jump off point in order to substantiate your argument
is
and
she
then
going to
say,
survive?
I'm
Is she
sorry?
going to survive? And if she can't survive me speaking imprecisely on Fox Sports, she needs to get out of the arena. She ain't
That's
man enough to do it.
disingenuous, bro. Listen,
People
we
speak
have so
imprecisely
so wait
about
wait
me
wait wait
all the
wait wait wait
time.
because you didn't speak in precisely. You've been doing this for a long time and you know exactly what it is that you're doing. And just because you're good with words, and I may be a little bit more of a C student, but just because you're good with words don't mean that we can't see through it. The problem is that you arrogant, right? And you arrogant and you've never, I'm not sure if people are really honest with you in your circle and helping you to understand that the greatest measure of a man is doing the thing they don't want to do when they don't want to do it. And so when you don't want to apologize, even when you know you clearly was wrong, and using her as the jump off point for your argument and then say, hey, she should be able to deal with it, that's bullshit. You know that's bullshit.
So, any guys watching this that ever been in a relationship, and there's some little inconsequential point that your woman wants to debate and argue with you about, and go to the ends of the earth about something inconsequential, you're seeing this play out right now. And this is what I'm talking about: the female energy with men. We're debating some shit that doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't.
We're lost in something there's a real problem in
I like how
Black
you did
America,
that,
the
though.
breakdown of family, and you want to have a big long argument about something that's completely inconsequential. I'm giving you the time. We could talk about some things more substantive, but we've been trained. Our whole culture is so feminine that we get lost in inconsequential things that mean nothing. Continue. It's your
And the
show.
reason why I disagree with that though, Jason, is because you're trying to spin the narrative to remove accountability. And in order to even be honest about and solve for the problems that we have in our community, the first thing that we have to do is we have to look in the mirror and hold ourselves accountable before we can decide to join inside of another conversation. Because that was completely irrelevant to what it was that was being communicated about and talked about on that particular platform. In addition to that, you talked about black men specifically, or you talked about fathers, right? You talked about fathers being raised in a home. So we're gonna go to the space that I'm assuming that you'd rather have a conversation about because we just gonna agree to disagree, right? You talked specifically about how, and I'm not sure, and I'm gonna ask for you to clarify. I took it as you were speaking specifically about Tyre Nichols, right? And that black men or men specifically don't know how to submit to authority, right? When pulled over, we don't know how to, follow the leadership of whatever it is or the authority of whoever it is that's pulling us over. Was you speaking specifically about Tyre Nichols, or were you just speaking in general?
Speaking in general,
Okay, okay. So what do you really believe is the issue within the black community specifically? Do you think that it's one thing? Do you think that one thing is bigger than the other? Do you think that it's specifically women, feminism, or how it is that single mothers are raising young men and that's the demise of our communities? Or do you think that it's something that's bigger than that?
it's the we have no family structure. All properly functioning houses, neighborhoods, counties, cities, states, countries, civilization is founded on family structure, man, woman, and child. That there in the history of the world, in the history of the world, there have been no properly functioning societies that aren't based in a family structure, man, woman, and child. We black people have been talked out of the family structure. This has been going on for 60, 70 years. The whole Great Society movement, the government check, replacing the man, feminism movement, black women have bought into it. They want to be the leaders. I have a biblical worldview. Man is meant for leadership, and that's the role that he was called into and created for by God. Uh, and we're just out of order with God's natural order. And so anytime you're this out of order and you reject the family in the level that we have, talk about on my show. I'm
Hmm.
guilty of this. Other,
What do you mean by
you
you
know,
guilty of it?
in my own I did not. I prioritized career success and a bunch of other BS early in my life more so than family because I was completely out of line and living in the world and had more of a. Although I was a believer in God, my actions were more in line with the secular community. And so there's no bigger crisis, no bigger driver of problems than the breakdown of family within the black community. It's coming to all communities. Uh, but it's most acute within us. That's our problem. It's not white supremacy. It's not police. Again, anytime your communities are saturated with single parent households, there's going to be no effective policing. There'll be attempts, but mama and daddy have to be the first police officers that children deal with. When that's not the case, when it's grandmama and auntie and cousin and this and that, you're just you're just gonna have chaos within those communities, and there's gonna be bad outcomes. And Tyre Nichols, what I was arguing again on my show and in my he's just collateral damage to the breakdown within our communities and the breakdown of families. And we produce a lot of collateral damage in our communities
On
because
his
of the
part
lack
or
of
on the part
family
of the
structure.
officers or both?
Excuse me?
On his part, the part of the officers or both? Because when you say the breakdown, it's a lot of different factors that I think that people observing what happened with Tyre Nichols would point to as far as how things could have been prevented or how things could have been done differently. So, like for example, when you say the breakdown, one person could say, okay, well, he should have never ran in the first place and maybe he would still be alive today, right? Submitting to authority. Another person would say, well, it's the officers and how it is that they operated and their inability to be able to control themselves and police themselves effectively. And then another person will say, well, people make mistakes and they do stuff. But then what about all of the officers around them and their inability to be able to stand up and say, hey, we got to stop or whatever like that? Do you think that it was on the part from an individual perspective as far as Tyree or the police officers or the police or the people that were around them? Or do you think that it was more from a collective perspective?
I think these five police officers behave like gang members, and I'll be very interested when we get the real details on what was motivating them. I don't believe this was a traffic stop for Tyree Nichols doing anything wrong. This looked like a gang hit to me. But in terms of I'm go back to my overall thesis of what I'm trying to say is
Mm-hmm.
that when you have communities that are dominated by single parents, unsupervised kids, what the police will end up doing, because again, when fathers aren't in the homes, when the family's broken down, kids, young men are attracted to gangs. And
Correct.
so anytime you have concentrations of gangs. What the police will end up doing is creating a gang within the police force to police the gangs in their community. This is commonplace all over the country. They've had TV shows that depict it and show it, and the TV shows are based off reality. One of my favorite TV shows is The Shield. It was based off the reality of what went on in Los Angeles in the 80s in the ramparts. The LAPD or the police law enforcement out there started this group Ramparts, no different than the Scorpion Unit, and it's the whole strike team and the show Shield was a replication of a police force creating a gang to go combat gang violence. That's what Memphis did. It's commonplace all over the country.